We are live again for another episode. Today I'm coming to you again from Florida. We are hanging out here, the office set up, overlooking the golf course and the pool. You guys can see. Whoa. Can you see? I'm just gonna sit up here in the office and come to you live from the second floor. What happened today? So just giving you a recap of what's happened this week. For one, we had a Bank of Canada rate cut today, which all the big five Canadian banks will pass on another 25 basis point cut, another quarter cut. So we're now at 4.25%, I believe, for the overnight lending rate. It marks another cut, adding to, I think, the bullish case scenario, but at the same time, sort of underscoring the fact that inflation is coming down, underscoring the fact that the economy is not doing so well that there are challenges. And I think that we've clearly seen that the job market is not strong and not resilient in Canada as it was. We're under terrible leadership. Talking about elections, the NDP leader in Canada, Jagmeet Singh, tore up the coalition agreement with the Liberal Party, which is going to trigger an election probably if the Conservatives can get any vote of non-confidence. We will have an election this fall with any luck. I like to use Canada as, the example of the best property on the block with the worst property manager and a lot of deferred maintenance. Canada is an amazing country, one of the biggest countries in the world. In terms of quality land, we are the biggest. Russia has more land, but again, the land isn't as good of a quality. Canada has the most natural resources, the best, we could sustain a billion population in Canada easily. We could hold 1 billion people and still be very, very good. In terms of global warming and climate change, that makes Canada more tropical and a better place to be. I mean, places like Vancouver don't even get snow anymore. We have, in BC there, we're starting to have a really great climate all throughout Canada. So I'm very bullish on Canada. I'm really bullish on Canadian real estate in the long term. I think we're under terrible management under Justin Trudeau for 8 years. He's run the economy into the ground with bad policy. But remember, that's changeable. The Canadians can come together and we can vote for change. I think probably we'll have a swing in the next election to blue, to conservative. And when that happens, we'll see a lot of policy that's good for business. And being good for business is good for the country. It's good for the long term. Socialism is good for the short term. It feels good now. It's like having a drink, and then tomorrow you wake up and there's a hangover. When you invest in young entrepreneurs, when you invest in the people in an economy that are going to grow that economy, instead of right now, we push out doctors, we push out entrepreneurs. Something like 33% in a recent poll, or 32% in a recent poll, almost a third of Canadians currently believe or are planning to leave Canada for somewhere else globally because of cost of living and a number of other reasons they cited. That's troubling when 32% of your population wants to leave. Now, at the same time, we have a compounding population growth rate of over 3% a year. We took in 1 million immigrants when you do that for a number of years in a row, and you take in 5, 6, 7, 8 million people into a country like Canada with less than 40 million people, and you add 20% to the population, you're going to have friction and challenges. So Canada has challenges right now with immigration and challenges with available housing. We don't have enough. It's hard to build. We aren't a very, great environment, I think, for entrepreneurs right now, but I think it can get better. I think there's a lot of potential for Canada. I'm extremely bullish for Canada over the next 5 to 10 years. I think if we had a conservative leadership in place and we started bringing in some policy that was, people rag on Canada, but Canada's actually got a couple really great things going for it. In terms of places to retire, if you have kids, it's one of the best places to early retire in the world. The government currently pays you $660 cash, tax-free a month. It's equivalent to $1,000 a child pre-tax income. So if you do the math on that, you're looking at, if you have 4 kids, you're getting $4,000 a month in pre-tax income given to you by the Canadian government just because you have kids until they turn 18. On top of that, you got so many other benefits in Canada, like free healthcare, free dental now as well, free prescriptions, free drugs, stuff like that, free. The libraries and public services in Canada are very good. And as much as people rag on the tax system, it is designed well for real estate investors. If you're a real estate investor and you watch my channel, Canada's actually pretty great. In fact, to the point where I wouldn't leave to the US from a tax perspective. It's probably less beneficial to live in Florida where there's no state tax than to live in Ontario or Alberta. Alberta's a good comparison. Alberta out west has very similar tax policies to Florida in that there is very little provincial tax. The corporate tax rates in the first $500,000 of income, of net income per year. So if you have $1 million in revenue and 500,000 in expenses and you net out to 500 grand profit, you're gonna pay like 8% tax in Alberta inside your corporation. 8% tax, that's it. That's the tax you're paying. So on $500,000 revenue, you're paying like 40 grand in tax. Maybe you can find some more deductions, some deferral. If you have a real estate business, you can use some depreciation on your business. You may pay no tax, none, for years, kick the can down the road. And our capital gains tax is on the first 250,000 per spouse per year, still at 50% tax-free. So if you make $1 million in a capital gain, or say $500,000 in a capital gain, you make $500,000, and you do this every single year. You make $500,000, you sell a property, cut properties off, make $500,000. You and your spouse each take $250,000. The first half of it is completely tax-free, no tax at all. Canada's like, the first half your profit, fully tax-free. The next half, we're gonna have an inclusion rate of 50%. They just raised it on anything over 250,000 per year to 66.67 inclusion rate. That's not tax rate, that's what's included. Meaning that you still get 33.344 whatever percent tax-free still with capital gains. So it is still a preferred way to earn income. And it's times your marginal tax bracket. So half of the capital gain. So if you made $500,000 in Canada and you split between you and your spouse and you do this every single year, your 250,000 nets down to 125 taxable. If your taxable rate is say 35% average, that's pretty average for your MTR, your marginal tax rate. That's like a third roughly, meaning that of that 125 grand, you're paying tax on a third of that. So your net tax on $500,000 in capital gain is like, I'm trying to do the math in my head here real quick for you guys, but it's like 40 grand per spouse, so like 80 grand in tax on 500 grand. It's not that bad, not that bad. I mean, for all the services and the quality of things that we get in Canada, I don't think it's that bad. I think that things are better maintained, and at the end of the day, people complain about Canada's healthcare system, but if you're a wealthy entrepreneur, you can just go and fly somewhere and get a procedure done. You don't have to get it done in Canada. At least in Canada, you have the free option. If I slip and fall in an accident, I don't get $1 million bill. I get nothing, no bill. And if it's an emergency, they will save my life in Canada. The doctors are fairly good, despite the fact that doctors aren't paid very well. They're not terrible in Canada. It's just that I think that the people that do stay in the healthcare space in Canada, they're the type of people who have to be in Canada for certain, whatever reason, they have family here, some sort of tie, or the fact they just love helping people. And the doctors making 250, 300 grand a year, they're okay that they could make 600 in the US, but they stay in Canada because it's not about the money for them. Some of the doctors I've talked to in Canada are like, it isn't about the money for them. They're not money people. They're trying to help people. And so people say like, if you don't pay well, that you'll lose all the good doctors. But yes, we have problems in our healthcare system, no doubt. We have a lot of problems in Canada. There's a lot of things that need to be fixed, and Canada's a lot worse off than it was 8 years ago. Fact, stop, period. But it could be a lot better, and I still think Canada's the diamond in the rough. And as a lot of investors flee, Canada, I'm doubling down. I have a cottage right now that's been for sale. It's like a $900,000 cottage on the water. I've reduced it to $499,000. It's 30 minutes outside of London. It's got 2 units. Massive lot on the water with boat docks down below. You can take your boat onto Lake Huron in like 10 minutes. I can't believe it isn't selling at $499. Literally like a $900,000 property at $499 right now, not selling. In the rural markets, some of the cottage markets, we're seeing in Ontario, prices have dropped 40%, 50%. I think it's the buying opportunity of a century. Where are you going to find waterfront property 30 minutes from London, 40 minutes from Sarnia, an hour and a bit from Kitchener-Waterloo, Cambridge, etc. Like, where are you going to find that kind of property under $500,000 for a nice big duplex on the land, on the water? You just, like, the prices are getting really good and the numbers are starting to work, where I'm like, they weren't working before. You guys heard me, I was loud and clear on the channel. In 2021, in the fall, into 2022, I sold almost all of my properties. I cycled through and cashed almost all of my real estate, had a huge bag of cash. I was actually bearish. I was like, this is nuts that prices had gotten that crazy, right? And so I think it was a little frothy. I think things have finally started to correct. Over that same period, the cost of inflation, just since 2020, inflation's up 24%. So your buying power is like a quarter gone, the buying power of your money. What that also means is that it's driven rents up 25%. But what's interesting is everything's inflated. The cost to build, the cost of labor, all of these factors that drive real estate. and drive business, all these costs are going up. The value of these properties is going up because you can't replace them. Like when land goes up in value because of inflation. But what's weird is at the same time, over that same period in the last 2 years, real estate's gone down in price. Like we're seeing, again, like I just gave you an example. There's another cottage I have, it's more like an estate of 2 houses on one lot. It's like 9 or 10 bedrooms. We have it listed for $699 right now. The property sold for like $680 3-4 years ago. We put 200 grand renovation in it. It was a dump when we bought it. Things should be 900 to $1 million easily for 2 houses, like 400 grand a house. It's pretty standard, 300-400 grand a house in the area. And it's still no buyers, none. Like I'm talking to realtors in the area and they're like 2 transactions have happened in this area. Tons of listings, nothing clicking. And the reason for that is because people can't qualify. I made a post with this 6 months ago. I was like, given the current stress testing environment where they require you to test at a much higher rate to qualify for a mortgage right now, to buy like a $500,000 house right now, like a basic $499K house, you would need to show 6 figures income, which means like only 20% of Canadians actually could qualify for an average house right now. 80% of Canadians couldn't qualify. And that's because rates are so high. So as rates fall, real estate becomes attractive again, everything starts making sense. We are an economy dependent on low rates. Unfortunately, we've set up our system to be reliant on, and they could make government change, they could make policy change that would, they would change that. They could make it so that people could actually afford to buy. They'd stop the stress testing rules, bring back 35-year amortizations. There's things they could do that would make it viable, Anyway, my thesis is that rents continue to rise. We've seen that. We've seen that rents are continuing to rise. There's a housing shortage in Canada like you wouldn't believe. No one's investing in the housing. The housing starts aren't keeping up to the need. So there's just an imbalance that exists. There isn't enough places for people to live. Land over time is in the good areas is going to be, I think, more and more desirable. So I'm extremely bullish on the long-term prospects of Canada to the point where it's interesting, like Florida hasn't had a pullback, but Ontario's down 25-30%. To me, that's like looking at 2 bank stocks and one's down 30% for no reason. And so I see value in Canada more so than I even see it in places like Florida or other places that haven't been affected as largely. And interestingly, I blanket Canada, but like you go out east in Canada, prices are up 10%. You go in Ontario, prices are down 30%. So there are areas like Calgary is up, I think, 15%. So it's gone up over this time, while Ontario's down 30%. So certain areas are largely unaffected, interestingly. So when I say Canada, I really am talking about southwestern Ontario, where I live, in and around Toronto, London, that whole corridor. We're seeing some real value, I think. And part of that is like, well, part of it was that it was overinflated, and that's corrected, which is good and natural and healthy. But I think as rates fall to 2%, you can justify those valuations again. And so there is that upside that exists of just going back to where we were in 2022. Forget inflation, It's interesting. Someone just said New Brunswick's up 10% year over year. So true, Out east, you are seeing massive appreciation. People are leaving Ontario and going to the cheaper places. And things balance out over time. And I'm probably pretty bullish on Ontario, I think, right now. I think that it's a great place to be. It's got a lot of really great things going for it. Honestly, myself personally, there's almost nowhere else I'd rather live than on the lake, like on Lake Huron. Beautiful, clean lake. In the world, there are very few places that rival Ontario on the lake in the summer. Very few places in the whole world. I've been to Bahamas, I've been to Florida, Miami, West Palm Beach, all these places that are amazing. They're just not as good. It's a fact. We have no hurricanes. We have no natural disasters hardly. If you buy new build stuff in Ontario, there's no rent control. We have no rent control. If you buy a unit built in 2020, or you build an ADU or something, and you rent it out, and you decide your rent's gonna go from $2,000 to $3,000 or $4,000, you can just change your rent in a second. The laws are on the landlord's side for newer built stuff. There's no rent control. So you have full power and control of your property. A lot of people don't know that. There is still, I think, advantages to investing in Ontario, and I don't know. I like Florida too. I think Florida's got a lot of great prospects. People are moving to Florida. It's a desirable state. I think that the red states over time will do better than the leftist states. It's same in Canada. Our California is Vancouver, right? So BC is very unfriendly. It's an unfriendly environment. I have no interest in investing in Vancouver, as an example. The numbers make no sense there at all. Just like investing in California or New York makes zero sense. I would never want to be in New York City or LA or Vancouver. It just doesn't make sense. I get that people love it, it's lifestyle, but the math doesn't make any sense. The math does make sense in, say, outside of London, Ontario, or in Sarnia, or in other areas around here, around there. I'm actually in Florida right now, but yeah, I don't know. Toronto doesn't make a lot of sense right now, though. To be fair, Toronto's numbers are they're getting better than they were. I mean, things have made a lot more sense than they did in 2022, and I think it's really an inverse reaction to rates. So that's what I want to talk about today. Was that like rates determine what real estate trades at. And I think we're trending, inflation's like 2.7%, trending back down to 2%. At 2% inflation, if we could hold that for some time, we were higher for longer, for a long time, actually. But I think that things will swing the other way. And I think that if they don't start aggressively cutting in the US, they're going to see some real pain in the economy. Like, it takes time for the pain to be felt, for the bankruptcies and all of that. And a lot of that, I'm just going to share it. I'm going through some of that with people right now. I've lent out some money to people, and a few of the people I've lent out are going into bankruptcy. And it's a pain in the ass to go through a foreclosure process to take a property back. It's or on the edge of bankruptcy. A few of the people, I don't know if they will declare or not, but they're damn close. And it's just mind-boggling to me that people put themselves in a situation where they don't think things through, they don't do the numbers, they don't, all the things that you need to be doing, they weren't doing. And it has ripple effects in the economy. Even investors like myself are affected by these foreclosures, right? Like, all these guys aren't paying mortgage payments right now. I'm trying to foreclose on properties where I'm making nothing. And I have a cost. If I borrowed from my HELOC, I might have a 7% cost on that money. And maybe I lent it out at 14, but they're not paying. So I'm foreclosing on things. Like, this is an example. I was going into foreclosure. I had to save it. Another one we just picked up went into foreclosure. I got another one that's going into foreclosure. So I'm going to start picking up these hotels and stuff like that and developments because I lent to these investors and they're just going belly up. This is the time, history says, that fortune favors the bold, right? So I'm going all in this time. I'm going all in, and I'm going to be operating and cash flowing and working as hard as I can to come out of this stronger than I went into it. And that's the hope. Other than the stock trading stuff, I should come out stronger. If I wasn't stock trading, because I shorted the NASDAQ and blew my account, and that sucked. It was a 7-figure loss. But in the real estate space, I've been doing okay. All things considered, I've done really well. So zooming out, that reminds me that I should be focused on areas where I have a competitive advantage, areas where I can deliver value in business and in real estate. Real estate really is a business if you run it properly. There's much more upside where you can control your fate. So that's, people ask me, what's the secret to real estate investing? Follow-up. My follow-up game is really good. Like, I will follow up every day until I get the answer. Every day. And that's what it takes. Like, you got to follow up on something 10 times for it to get done. If you don't, if you just sit back and like, oh, everything's going to work itself out, it won't. Being a good real estate operator is really just about like constant, unrelenting follow-up on every issue and prioritizing those issues and constantly like a micromanagement, sort of like a video game in a lot of ways. But yeah, that's flipping, that's real estate. All of it is just making task lists, trying to solve the issues as cheaply as you can to keep costs down. Like, cost battle is the biggest thing. A lot of people just outsource things. That's how you get in trouble. Every operator who I see is going down right now wasn't acutely focused on cost control. They're like, oh, I just hire the GC, pay them whatever, just get it done, speed. And it's like, well, no, price over speed. You can't just speed and overspend, right? You blow up. So cost control in business is so important. And so you've got to be really watching those costs. You got to be micromanaging your projects. In a bull market, the guys who are speed, spend whatever, just do as much volume as you can, those folks look great. But when the tide goes out, things get tight, rates go high, prices go down, that model fails. There's a lot of risk. So you've got to be focused on your downside protection as well in those markets. So this is the time to hang in there, guys. If you're holding real estate right now and you're like, I don't know what to do, probably makes sense to hold right now rather than liquidate stuff at big discounts because there just aren't buyers, but the buyers will come. As rates fall, the buyers will come. So I think we're gonna have a bullish spring. I think the banks are gonna bring out, by next spring, my forecast has been and continues to be a 3.99% spring mortgage. So we're gonna see mortgages in the 3% range again for the 5-year fixed. So in the threes again, stuff really starts to pencil. 3.89, 3.79. That was like when I was investing in 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, it was all 3. That was the rates we got. Like, so more recently, some investors have gotten used to this whole, free 1% money, because we did have some Like there was like, I think I had a 1.2% 5-year variable on my house at one point. Like the money was literally free in Canada. You get 1% loans. You could do a 30-year or 50-year CMHC mortgage at like 1.3%, 1.4%. It was nuts. It was literally like free money. Which what's that going to do? It's going to inflate the price of things. It's just how it works. So yeah, I mean, ebbs and flows in the market. Ooh, we got a super chat. Jamal, thank you for the $10 super chat. Thoughts on building a 4 to 5 unit property portfolio, working on paying down debt on those properties instead of constantly growing for a more humble retirement experience? Yeah, I mean, there's different ways to slice it. There's actually, it really depends on your preference, but when you build new, the nice thing is you have no rent control in Ontario. So there's definitely some advantages. Like if you have a new property versus an old property, a new property, the maintenance schedule is all caught up. The roof's brand new, the wiring's new, the plumbing's new, HVAC's brand new. So you're not getting calls for your furnace being out in the winter. You don't get any of the stress stuff that you get with an old building. Now you're gonna pay a premium for that. You mentioned building. Maybe you have a cost advantage. To be honest, I could probably build cheaper than most builders could build. It would actually make sense. Like if you have a background like mine where you understand construction and it all makes sense in that situation, building new, your maintenance plan is now zero. You have no maintenance to worry about. That's most of the struggle in real estate. But then to get that building set up, I'm sure there's gonna be a huge task list of things you're gonna have to do to unlock that value, right? So there's gonna be pros and cons. Like if you wanted to set up a nice retirement, I agree. Having nice new build rental portfolio, new build properties attract A+ tenants as well. So the nicer the unit, the nicer the tenant you can attract. And so you obviously have to vet those tenants, put the effort in up front. But if you put the effort in up front and you built a really nice property, 4 or 5 properties on it, you got everything the way you wanted it, and you put new tenants in it, you're gonna get a lot of these benefits, right? I just see your correction. Sorry, I meant purchasing, not building. Okay, so you could purchase new as well. And the same things I've mentioned make sense, just you're not gonna have a cost advantage. Although, sometimes in markets like these, you'll see weird situations. And I saw this a little bit in London 6 months ago. It's interesting because all the fixer-upper houses were going for like 80 cents on the dollar. And I think people were underestimating how much work was needed on these fixer-upper old houses. And the new stuff was trading at almost the same price. And when you factored in the work you had to do, you actually lost money and overpaid for the fixer-upper stuff. Everyone wanted to become a flipper. Everyone wanted to get in there, and because people hear the stories about successful flippers and they just want to get in there and do it too. And I think people were bidding up the prices of these crappy houses, underestimating the fact that, or maybe they just couldn't qualify for the $600,000 house. So they'd buy the $450,000 house that needs $200K in work. And so then you have an old house and you're in it for $650 once you've done all the work. You could have just bought the brand new one for $600. There's some of that going on. Some of the builders were so depressed, they were giving these properties away. I was seeing some transactions close at crazy prices. You could literally hire a builder to build you a triplex in a new subdivision for less than you could buy an old triplex for and renovate it. And then you'd have a brand new triplex with the maintenance schedule of everything brand new. In terms of like CapEx being your furnace, your roof, all the stuff you have to do to keep a property up is all brand new. So you have no worries, no headaches. That's attractive if the numbers can pencil. It's more attractive than buying something and fixing it. So it just depends. I like to get a deal. Like I just don't like to pay retail for anything that I buy. I just like wholesale. So when I buy, I would go to a builder who's going bankrupt, who's almost finished a new build property, and go in and approach and say, hey, look, don't give me occupancy, don't give me tearing on, whatever. I'll take over, I'll put floors and I'll paint. And that would cost me like 10, 20 grand to finish this off, and I have a brand new building. That would be an opportunity. I mean, there's some of that popping up too with the new construction. So it can make sense. New construction can make sense too. Turnkey stuff can make a lot of sense from a return on time perspective. Early in my career, I didn't value my time. And so, I guess the question is, what do you put value in your time? If you want a passive, peaceful retirement, then yeah, definitely buy new. Or if you're gonna do it and you're gonna retire, buy old, but catch up with the whole maintenance schedule. Look at the furnaces, look at the roof, look at the windows, all the CapEx items, get all that caught up. And then once it's all caught up and it's all new, the way you want it, then you can sit back on autopilot, right? So real estate can be autopilot, but it's batch work. So there'll be like, nothing will happen for a year at your property. It'll be super passive. And then something bad will happen and you'll have a whole bunch of stuff to have to deal with. That's just how real estate is. I like lending. I like funding people's flips. I like to find young guys. I think something I might niche down into more is like finding great young operators and backing them. and having them grind. And I can make a 10, 12, 15% return on autopilot. And once I've set up good systems with that same person, the first deal is painful because I'm training them and teaching them and they're learning and I'm learning, and that's painful. Even the second deal can be painful. But the fifth deal is like clockwork, just runs. And so there's something to that model. I've been deliberating on this for a while. I'll lay in bed at night thinking like, why has no one been able to scale flipping? Like, I don't know of any big company that's tried flipping and successfully scaled. And it's because employees don't give a shit. And you need equity ownership. I think, honestly, in my opinion, Airbnb arbitrage is the same. It needs to be mom and pop, invested into the re-rental projects. You can't systemize it at scale. It doesn't work. No one does it at scale well. Like, you look at like Sonder, they're like the biggest. They have like 90,000 units that they re-rent. They rent from landlords and they put it on Airbnb and they re-rent. They're near bankruptcy. They have no cash flow. The business is like, it just doesn't work. You need to have an owner in there micromanaging all the little things. And it's just, I think the flipping's that way. Construction works at scale in a different way than flipping does because there's not as much of the variable risk, I think. Although a lot of the construction is super thin margins. Like, most builders make like 5-6% margin. A $1 million build, they'll make like 60 grand net profit after all their soft and hard costs. So it's a tough business. Construction is a really, really tough business. The market often doesn't pay enough to justify the high wages that a lot of these guys want to make. So, like, think about it. If you're in construction, you're a construction worker, you can go work for some lady in a nice subdivision and redo her bathroom for 80 grand. She will lose money doing that 80 grand renovation on her kitchen, her bathroom, when I can go to a bathroom for $6,000. Most contractors don't want to work for the $6,000 flipper guy who's not paying very well. They want to go get that juicy job that pays really well. But at scale, if you do those kinds of jobs, that homeowner is losing money. They're over renovating and they're spending too much and they don't get that back in equity. They might spend 80 grand, but their house doesn't go up in 80 grand in value. That's actually a losing proposition. The contractor is actually stealing value from the homeowner by overcharging for the renovation. Now, contractors all want to work for those kind of jobs. They want the high-end bathroom, the high-end kitchen, where they can charge a 600% markup or 200% markup or whatever, and they get paid $80 an hour, $100 an hour. I want to find, as a flipper, I had to live in the margin. I have to have a profit there. So I have to find the guy that wants to work for $30 an hour because that's the only way I can make a profit. If I hired the $80 an hour guy, I would lose money. And a lot of people get into real estate and they hire their expensive, uncle who's, $100 an hour, and they're like, oh, he comes and helps and does the flip, and they lose money at the end of the project. And they've sent me messages. I've gotten so many people send me messages saying, hey, like, especially now because the market's been going down, they're like, I lost 100 grand on this flip, Mike. Like, what did I do wrong? I don't know what happened here. Costs went out of control. And it's because they use expensive trades. And the trade that does the nice kitchen and the nice bathroom isn't the person you want to fix up a rental property. You need to find the guy who's okay for 25, $30 an hour, who probably has substance abuse, drinking issues, who probably doesn't show up exactly when he's going to say he's going to do it. But that's where you have to live as a flipper. That's where the margin is. He's probably not WSIB compliant and insured and whatever. He's just a dude who works 50 hours a week, goes on Marketplace and Kijiji or whatever, Craigslist, and posts ads and gets jobs and just wants to make a healthy living. He's not trying to get rich, just trying to make his $1,000 a week, $1,200 a week, whatever. Just happy with that, like your typical blue collar guy who doesn't want to go through all the bullshit to make a real company, have all those extra costs, have staff, have a truck. He's going to show up in his personal beat up truck. He's not going to have uniform on. He's not going to make you proper invoices. He's going to write something on a piece of paper for you. He's not going to do quotes for you. He's going to show up and work. Those are the kind of guys that I have to live off of. Like, that's the flipper business. The problem is when you do that at scale, it doesn't work. And you have to start hiring guys, you have to start paying for trucks and insurance and making sure that everyone on site is fully compliant, and you've got like safety hats and all this bullshit like that. When you put all those costs on, it's $8 to change a light bulb. My friend Kevin, meet Kevin's channel, he made a video on this like 5-6 years ago. He made a construction company and tried to explain why he went bankrupt. The video's like, I lost 300 grand or something. It's a good video. It's an old video, but it's a really good video where it walks through and he hits the nail on the head. He says it better than I can even say it now, but basically explains why it's so expensive to do it properly and why there's no profit in it. The overhead is too high to make it work. So anyway, that's my thoughts on construction businesses, property management businesses, razor thin margins. Deal with the bullshit. I mean, people are like, Mike, how do you do it? I deal with the bullshit. That's how I make a profit. is I'm fighting with the contractor who's like, I'm showing up for my payment tonight. I need to get paid daily. I can't wait for a Friday paycheck. Like that kind of guy is the kind of guy I have to hire most of the time. They're like calling me 7 times for payment when they finished the job an hour ago. Whereas like they can't wait to invoice for a week or 2. Those kind of people work for a lot less. And that's how we get the jobs done in reasonable prices. Occasionally I'll use the higher end guys, but for the most part, you can't afford in this business to do that. And so at scale, what happens is the government's gonna force you to use all the most expensive guys, because wrangling those cats is difficult. And when one trade comes after the next sub trade, they didn't do the job properly, the next guy's pissed off. And so there's this whole cascade. You need to basically herd the cats. And you need a person like me that's there herding the cats. It's why, a lot of people don't like real estate investing. It can be a challenge, the active part of it. The passive part of it is like everything's fixed up, you have a nice new property, it's rented out. That part's pretty passive. But getting it there, buying the undervalued property at 30 to 80 cents on the dollar, turning it around, stabilizing it, the hard stuff where you make the real money. If it was easy, everyone would do it. And if everyone was doing it, there'd be no profit in it. So I guess that's suffice it to say. Bom, bom, bom. Da, da, da. What up, Mikey? Miss you, brother. Thanks, Jimmy. Joe says, buy Bitcoin dip. Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin is, obviously been dipping a little bit here. We'll see. ETH is down like 1/3. It's lost like 1/3 of its value from the top, which is shitty. I have some holdings. It's not a major part of my portfolio, so I don't cry at night over it. Dominic says, do you understand the math of real estate, like a mortgage lending and math of buying a house and then the remake of a house? Or how do you understand is the question. So I guess there's a lot to unpack in that question. It really comes down to like, I think every flipper or every person taking on a big real estate project should understand the fundamentals of how a house is built from start to finish. Go on YouTube and watch videos to understand what is every process from start to finish. Like there's certain things that people just don't know. Like you can't be taping while you're painting. You can't be painting, but you already put your floors down. There's an order to how you do things. You have to frame, you have to insulate, the vapor barrier inspect, then you can put your drywall on, then you can tape. Then once all taping is done fully and all the sand is done, no dust, then you can paint. Then when the painting is done, then you can put floors in. Then you can put trim indoors in, right? There's an order to things. And I see a lot of guys doing things out of order, where they're like putting trim on, and over here there's still someone sanding, and over here someone's painting, and the floors are going in. And they're like, you're painting your floors. Like there's an order to things that you have to understand. There's a little bit of knowledge you have to do real estate. So I would say 1, get the knowledge. Go on YouTube, watch videos, shadow someone who's a builder, understand the process. You can't manage the cats. You can't herd the cats, as what I say. The sub trades, all the different sub trades you need, like the painter, the taper, the flooring guy, the trim millwork guy, the taper, the boarder, the insulation guy, the electrician, the plumber. There's 10 trades right there. There's probably 25, 30 trades. You got your HVAC guys, you got the different guys that do different things. And you need to manage all those sub trades. You have to understand what they need done before they can start. And then the person that comes after them, what they need to see done by this sub trade. And it's your job to make sure they did it properly. And that the site is ready for the next trade that follows. And you do it in a certain sequential order. Because if you don't, and you try to do one thing outside of another, if you didn't have your roof on fully, but you're putting electrical in, like what are you doing? Or you're trying to paint when you don't have floors in. You're gonna paint all of your floors. It's gonna cost your cleaner like triple, because your cleaner comes at the very end. And if they have to clean up after certain sub trades, it can be a whole mess. So there's an order and a flow. It's like, and if you do it well and you understand everything, it's like a beautiful symphony. You're just like the conductor, and things are just coming in along, and you have all your people you use, and maybe occasionally you're testing those guys to make sure that they're still pricing you well. So you might bring in the odd quotes here and there. But once you have your symphony flowing, you can set up a few flips, get them going. Then it's a beautiful orchestra. So people ask me what it takes, I guess, to help you understand. First, you have to understand the process. Then you have to understand the cost of each of those things and find out the cheapest way to get those things done. There's ways to save money all along the process. I could think of 10,000 little tips that I could share, but that is the business, right? In terms of like real estate in and of itself, once a property is stabilized and fully cash flowing, you've unlocked all the value in the property. Then it's passive. But then the returns go down to like 6 or 8%. So the big returns are in the transitional period of an asset, of turning it from derelict or distressed or not optimized to fully optimized. And that process, it is arduous. It is a challenge. So yeah, for sure, there's definitely math to all of it, and taxes to all of it too. You can, so many different angles you can think through. Lending is totally different. To me, like I love lending businesses. I have always wanted to build a real estate portfolio to like $100 million and just have a lending MIC, mortgage investment corporation or a trust, where I had a bunch of mortgage brokers that worked for me and a few assistants and a little back end family office. And we just funded other operators like me. Because being an operator sucks. Like straight up, I do it because it makes good money. I do it because I make 100 grand a month or more. If I wasn't making that kind of money, I would have no interest in hurting all the cats. It's a shit job. It can pay well and it's a useful skill, but it's painful. And I think it pairs, like my skill set pairs really well with a lending business, because the worst case scenario in a lending business is I have to take the property, finish it, and sell it. So me being a realtor who understands construction and has cost management means I can step in and do the job of the person I was lending to, of the borrower, and finish the job. And that's what's required. Like right now, I just took a hotel over. We're taking another hotel over that's in foreclosure. I'm taking another property that's going through foreclosure as well right now. There's another we've got like 5 properties that we're taking through foreclosure right now. And I have to step in and be the operator. I have to put money in, finish it, take it to market to get my money back. That's how I mitigate risk. As a lender, I can take a 15% compounded return in a bull market, in a neutral market. I'll never lose. People will pay the interest because the properties are appreciating. They'll refinance me out. But in a bear market like we're going through right now in Ontario, the people are just walking away. And so I have to come in there, I have to finish it. And so this is like the worst case scenario in lending. It's like I have to come in and finish it. And even still, I've rarely lost money. At the end of the day, even if I put the extra work in, I can guarantee I don't lose money. What other place can I get 15% compounded return and never lose money? Like even in a recession, I still don't lose money. I just have to lean in and put time in. In the stock market, if I put more time in, more research, it doesn't fucking matter. Nvidia is going to go to, $1,400 a share, and then it's going to go down to like $80 a share. You have no control. Doesn't matter what you research. The market trades irrationally. And so I think for a retirement portfolio, I like lending way more. So I would like to eventually get to a lending portfolio. The reason lending is nice is if you do it right and you underwrite your deals properly and you learn from your mistakes, you can go through a bear market and have no foreclosures, none. If I had been better at underwriting, I would not be in the situations that I'm in now. If I had not had a heart, that's something I had learned to like cut off the heart. Like I was helping friends out and like, no, this is a business. I'm sorry I can't lend you money. I don't care for friends. I don't care about your situation. No, sorry. Or I would have been more ruthless in my contracts. Well, I've learned a lot about how to write contracts properly, where I didn't put things in that I should have put in. Because I thought, oh, well, I've known the person for a long time, 8, 10 years doing business together. It'll never happen like this. The world will never get this bad. It will get this bad. Think through those scenarios. If it does, are you ready? And you could have a really robust lending business that's very fruitful, that produces great cash flow. Like, imagine if I had $100 million in capital in a lending mortgage investment trust with a few mortgage brokers working, some assistants. That thing would run like clockwork, and I could collect like a 15% yield on $100 million is $15 million a year. It's over $1 million a month. Let's say even a quarter of that, or even 10% of that, went as a fee for me just to orchestrate it all. And it wasn't even all my capital, let's just say. If it was my capital, even better. 15 million a year is a ton of money. There's nothing you can't do. 15 million a year, you're living real luxurious. Like there's not a lot in life you can't do. You could rent a private jet for a little while if you wanted to. You're in a fancy car, whatever. Like there's a lot you can do, pretty much anything. That's a top tier. I think that's where I'm headed towards. That's my current goal, is like if I can make $1 million a month, that would be like amazing. So that's a goal right now of mine. But we'll see. I think for most people watching this, they just want to retire. They want to live a better life. Most of my viewers here just want to live a better life. And so I would say lending is a way to do that passively in a way that real estate isn't. Because you're shielded. If you lend to rental properties, the owner of that property has put in 25% down. They're funding the bills. They're personally putting their income into it. They're shielding you. As the lender, you're shielded from the tenant. And the tenant's paying the mortgage. So you're getting basically the same cash flow as if you owned a property, but none of the bullshit, none of the headaches. So that's where I think if you're okay with a lesser return, 10 to 15%, you can do a 10% mortgages right now, risk-free. You could literally, I know of opportunities, people wanting to borrow 40 cents on the dollar. So they have $1 million property, they own in cash, they want to borrow 400 grand to buy another property or something, but they'll put up their one property as collateral. So if shit hits the fan, You get to take their $1 million house for 400 grand. That's like a 250% return for you. You want them to foreclose. You pray that they foreclose. But if they don't foreclose, you get 10% yield. That's what I call a risk-free return. I would say that's a lower risk of $1 million property falling below 400 before you lose your first dollar. It has to fall 60% before you lose a dollar. And you got interest up until they foreclosed, probably usually takes 6 months to a year before someone falls behind. Usually their first few payments, they make them on time, and then they fall behind, and they get late, and then they pay you half a payment and here and there, whatever. So my point is, yeah, in those cases where you lend 40% loan to value, it almost has to fall 70% really for you to lose anything, which is like, I would call it risk-free. I think literally putting your money in a bank account at $1 million in a bank account, because you're only 100,000 insured in Canada on balances with FDIC. I think the banks have a higher chance of failing than real estate falling another 70%. So I would call it 10% risk-free. People say, Mike, there is no 10% risk-free. Sure there is. You're gonna have a hard time finding those people who are looking to borrow and pay 10, 12% interest with a risk-free asset as collateral, for sure. But it's damn near risk-free. And that's where you gotta look for, is like, because risk-free capital pays 4 or 5% right now at the bank. That's what they call risk-free, in a savings account. It has risk, of course. Everything has risk. The bank could fail, whatever. But so 4 or 5%, and that's falling right now. Whereas like a mortgage is fixed in at a flat rate. So even if rates do fall, you're locked in for a 1 or 2 year term, still getting that 10, 12%. Whereas the bank account will fall over time as rates continue to cut, like they did today. They've cut every single meeting now. They will continue to cut probably every single meeting until we get to a reasonable, probably to get the HELOCs down to 4 or 5%. All the banks like BMO, RBC, et cetera, have gone to negative amortization in Canada. So most people are on fixed payment, but the interest went from 2% rate to 6% rate on their variable rate mortgages. Half of Canadians are in variable rate mortgages, or they've refinanced into a new product that's too expensive. And basically what's happening is they're not paying any principal. They're not even covering the interest. It's a negative amortization, meaning the mortgage balances are growing right now, not shrinking. So the bank's books are fucked. They will put immense pressure on the government to correct that. And we need about 3 more cuts before things are corrected. Again, bullish for bank stocks. I own shares in Bank of Montreal. I'm very bullish on the bank stocks correcting in the next 2 years to the upside. So very bullish on those stocks because I think that is a pressure that we will see. We have a monopoly in Canada, not a monopoly, I guess it's whatever you call 5 major banks that control everything. Unlike in other countries where you might have, like in the US, you'll have 1,000 different banks. In Canada, we have a much more consolidated financial system. And for sure, rates are coming down. It's bullish for real estate. It's bullish for banks in the long term. In the short term, there's pain. I think typically if you look at the data, when rate cuts start happening, there's a recession in tandem. So the economy is usually not doing well. Prices usually continue falling despite rate cuts. It takes typically a year lag before we see the benefits of a rate cut. So as rates continue to cut, the comps that are closing now, the comparable properties that are selling in the market, are stuff that sold 2 months ago that's finally closing now. So the appraiser has to look at stuff that was sold and transacted at the bottom of the market. And so that'll take time before we have new comps set that slowly inch the prices up. I think we're having a very bullish spring. I could be wrong though. The economy could really be in the shitter and no one wants to buy. There's still fear. It could take 2 years. In 2009, in the US, it took till 2011 for the market to start really rebounding dramatically. There was a lagged effect of downward pressure despite rates coming down because the economy was in shambles and there was fear. It's different this time though because in 2008, the real estate market collapsed. So there's fear of real estate assets and no one wanted to touch real estate assets because they saw the bubble collapse. They had no trust in the prices of real estate. So slightly different than 2008. But to look at that example, because looking at past data can help us understand what might happen in the future, right? What future data might look like to help us extrapolate what the future will look like. We have to look at what happened in the past. And so there's a delay, there's a lag. It takes time. We're still feeling the effects now of those hikes that we had last year. So there's still pain in the real estate market, still foreclosures and properties finally getting liquidated and more supply hitting the market than there are buyers. That will change. With rates falling, everyone and your uncle will begin buying properties again. Once the market starts rising, people start hearing stories of things appreciating. This is the once in 2 decades in Ontario, once in 3 decades. We haven't had it this bad since late 80s, early 90s. In the mid 90s, it was really bad in Ontario. It's just like that now. So I think that as rates go lower again, we get a conservative government. If there's an election this fall, I'm bullish on what can happen. And yeah, I mean, buy for cash flow, guys. Buy properties you can hold for a long time if you have to. Make sure they make sense, underwritten for these rates right now. Lock something in, plan for worst case scenarios. And when rates fall to 2-3%, you'll be laughing because you have all that upside and you've mitigated your risk. You're prepared for the downside. You're prepared to hold if you need to, and you're all good. Worried if I have to foreclose if he can't qualify for a bank mortgage. Okay, someone sent me a different question. Here it is. Hoping for a deal analysis. Looking to lend in second position to a guy that has a property in a corp with a BTB mortgage. I know the area, the property appraised at 700K. Mortgage is 550K. Be careful. You're in the danger zone. Sounds like you're in a danger zone. You don't want to ever get anywhere near 90% loan to value. I guess I'm just like throwing things off the top. If someone came to me with that deal, can you cross collateralize? Do they have another property that you can add to the blanket of the mortgage? So you might give them a second mortgage on this property, but you cross collateralize with their house, or you cross collateralize on something else, or they sign over the ownership to their car to you in a note that says, hey, if I don't pay, I'm gonna take the ownership to your car. Someone did that to me before. They signed over a Land Rover. It sits in my safe. So if I have to, I go and take their car and I impound it off their driveway. There's an example of things you can add for collateral. Can they give you something? Do they have grandma's watch or something special to them that you can put in a safety deposit box that is there in case they fuck you? You'd have leverage. That's the most important thing I've learned in this business going through this recession. It's one of the worst Ontario real estate corrections I've ever seen. Honestly, it's about the worst one in 30 years. So we're going through an amazing opportunity. But at the same time, I've learned a lot about leverage. You need to have cross collateral over something else that they value. And that's important, that you could force the control. Because if they don't have something to lose, Canadian bankruptcy laws, I did not know this, but your primary residence is fucking protected in Canada. If you go put a first and second mortgage on it, the lenders can't take your house. Your house is protected. Your car is protected in bankruptcy proceedings. Your personal shit is protected. Like in Canada, we're so socialist. If someone tries, they can actually bankrupt out of paying their debts to you, and they get to keep living in their house. They can live in a $1.2 million house in Ontario with a beautiful pool and a hot tub and whatever, and a beautiful house, and you can't even take it. You can't even force them to downsize. They have rights. That's fucked. Sorry, that one hit a nerve. I realized that the bankruptcy laws in Ontario are as socialist almost as our landlord-tenant board rules. Again, why it's really, really important. When you're lending, you have to look at that property. Do you like that property? If you lent 100 grand on that property, are you prepared to take that property for that price? Are you prepared to take it? Because if you have to go to that first lender. I would go to the first lender and talk to them. Are they a reasonable person to work with? If the person ahead of you, if you're going in second position, I hate second position. Don't do it. But if you are gonna do it, make sure you have good relations with the first mortgage and they'd be willing to work with you if, maybe even sign something. Say, hey, go to the first mortgage, say, hey, I want an agreement between us that if he defaults on the second mortgage, I will come in his place and you will stay on at the same rate and terms and I will take title to the property. Are you okay with that? If he falls behind to you at any point. And if they sign that and you want the property, you know the area, there you go. Now you're working yourself into the deal. So if you default, it's a win. So set it up to think through, if they don't pay you, if they default, how do you win? So in a bankruptcy, all you get is what you're secured against. You go after them, sue them personally, garnish some wages or something. But honestly, really, when I lend, I like to look at the underlying asset that I'm lending on. And if I have to take it, what's it worth? All right. Hey Mike, I'm in Edmonton, but looking at buying illegal duplexes and making it legal as a value add. Is there enough upside in this? It depends. So it's interesting, in Ontario, I used to do the same thing. I used to always buy illegal duplexes and legalize them. That was like one of my models that I did in 2016, 2017. I bought a lot of those properties and triplexes and stuff that weren't legal, and I made them legal. It's expensive. You run into a lot of problems sometimes with the city. In Ontario, they made it so that all properties 4 units and less in Southwestern Ontario can now be pushed through without any zoning changes. So there is no zoning value anymore. If you have a single family house that's a triplex, you can go to the city and say, I want to make a triplex now. Zoning says, okay, we don't care about parking, there's no restrictions. The Ontario government came down and was like, we need housing. Any property, despite its residential zoning, being single family or duplex, can have up to 4 units. Period. In a nice, $1 million subdivision where there's all single families, you can add 2 more units and make it a triplex. That's awesome, I think. It's pro-housing. It comes with a number of issues. Residents in that community don't like putting rental properties in and bringing tenants into a nice housing community. So there are obviously pushbacks and issues with it. But by and large, I would say it's net positive for real estate investors because we can add units, we can add cash flow. And when you better utilize the space, you take a 3,000 square foot house and make it into 3 1,000 square foot apartments. Your market rent on a 3,000 square foot house in London, Ontario is probably $2,700 a month, but 3 apartments is probably $6,000 a month. So you take the exact same square footage and it goes from being worth $2,700 a month to $6,000 a month. You can more than double the rent just by how you utilize the square footage. That was what I built a business around, was how do I add bedrooms? How do I add units? How do I take square footage I already have and make it better utilized? Now, in a house like this, mansion we took through foreclosure and we're flipping. Took it out of foreclosure, I guess, technically. This one would never make sense to chop up this 7,600 square foot house into I could top it into 10 apartments or 15 apartments, but the zoning would never allow for it. We're in a rich HOA community. It just wouldn't make sense. But in a lot of properties, it does make sense. You know, that random duplex, not in an HOA, just chilling in a random street, you could rent it out to one family, or you could split it up and rent it out to 2 families and make way more money on a per square foot basis. That is the value in real estate. Yeah, it's tough, Brandon. I don't know. I just had one of mine come up for renewal, and I did a 1-year fixed at 6%. I'm probably regretting it because rates cut again today. So as rates continue falling, I'll probably regret that I locked in a 1 year at 6% on one of my properties there. But my thought was I'm probably going to sell it. It's already maximized its value. When cottages come back next year, I'm going to sell that cottage. It's beautiful on the lake, stairs down to the beach, beautiful 5-bed, 4 full bath. A beautiful property, high ceilings. I'm gonna sell it for $800,000 or something. Someone's gonna come in and be it's their dream cottage, or their dream house and just live there. But not until rates fall to 3% again, I think, probably by strike with a buyer. So it depends on your timeline, I guess. Suffice it to say, the point I'm trying to make is it depends on when you wanna sell that property. If you lock in for 3 years, the interest rate differential will crush you if you try to sell or refinance that property a year from now. Because it's not just 3 months interest penalty, it's the interest rate differential calculation. So the bank will say, what is our profit over this full 3-year term if, say, rates fall to 3% and you're locked in at 5, that 2% differential over the next 2 years, they're gonna nail you with in some cases I saw penalties one time of $45,000, insane mortgage penalties. So be careful, because the fixed rate stuff can really bite, can really sting. Hi, Mike, would you work in public accounting if you or stay in government? I started at KPMG way back in the day. Public accounting doesn't pay well, but it's a good learning experience. You'll be exposed to a lot of cool things, learn a lot. I think it's a great place to start your career. Government is where you go to die. That's where you go to retire. It's a super cush job. You won't learn a lot. You won't do a lot for society. Our bloated government in Canada is, I think we're up I think they've doubled the staff over the last 8 years. The amount of, I think 1 in 4 Canadians work directly for the government. That's crazy. Services have gotten worse, and we've doubled the amount of staff working for the government. That's perplexing. That's bad management is what that is. Bad cost control, a number of fraudulent and terrible programs. Anyway, I gotta wrap this stream up. I'm going late here. I'm gonna go through this and see if I missed a good question here. Someone says they think this is the last few rate cuts before a currency reset. Perpetually rise, combat inflation. To be honest, there's different theories on this. To be clear, no one has any idea. I think a currency reset is a bit extreme. I don't think we would see that right away, but maybe something towards a international currency. Oh, my kids are home. Corporation is usually better as you get bigger. By the way, love your content. Please keep it up. Thank you. Appreciate it. what would change your mind about investing in real estate and remaining in Canada? Well, I am remaining in Canada. I go both. I go my winters in Florida. I live my best life. So irregardless of tax, I go where life is best. But Canada in the summer can't be beat. I would if I didn't live in Canada, I would vacation to Canada in the summers. So yeah, that's just my personal opinion on that one. I think I answered all the questions. Cool. I got all the questions. Smash the like button. As always, if you guys got value here, please jump in the comments, share the video. All of that would be great. Remember, the secret to unlocking wealth through you is to spend less, earn more, and maximize returns to the difference. Sorry, I got to block my daughter. My wife doesn't want her on camera. So see you guys next week, every Wednesday, 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. See you next week, guys.